you. Find out how every Thursday on Focus on Government and Development. We'll explore the programs, plans, and policies in place to improve your lives. Hear from the policymakers and call in with your questions and comments. Focus on Government and Development, Thursdays 8 to 9 p.m. on DBS Radio and Kyrie FM. Tuned in to the nation station DBS Radio. We're also broadcasting live on Kyrie FM and various social media platforms. Good evening and welcome to all of you tuned in. This is Focus on Government and Development. I am your host, Dion Dura Smith. We're back with you for another Thursday program. You know what we do during the 8 to 9 hour on Thursdays. We talk government and development, government initiatives, the programs, plans of this Dominican Labour Party administration. We welcome you to the program this evening. Hope that you had a splendid Thursday. Those of you who went out to the Dream 11 the cricket tournament, that ended in quite an exciting manner. Our congratulations to the Valley Hikers. But tonight we're here on this program to talk disaster management, disaster preparedness, hurricane preparedness to be more exact. And our guest this evening, Mr. Fitzroy Pascal, he's the National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Itoma James, the Acting Senior Met Officer, and Mr. Glenroy Toussaint, the Local Government Commissioner, as well as the NEPO Emergency Shelter Chairman. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Focus on Government and Development. How are you guys doing this evening?
Good evening, Dion, and good evening to your viewers and also your listeners. I am doing fine this evening.
All right, so while we're at it, Fitzroy, I'm sure many of our listeners know of you. They've heard you for many years, but just tell us a little bit about yourself and, a summary of what your work at the ODM entails.
Okay, I am Fitzroy Pascal. I am the National Disaster Coordinator. I have been in that position for the past 6 to 7 years, and before that, I headed the meteorological service. Meteorology is my background, and I also have some training in disaster management. In terms of what I do, interact with persons or people on a daily basis, trying to get them to embrace disaster management on island to save their life and their property.
Thank you, Fitzroy. Mr. Itoma James, you're relatively new to the position of Acting Senior Met Officer. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good night to you, Dion, and to all your listeners. Like you said, my name is Itoma James. I am the Acting Senior Meteorological Officer. My job really is to supervise the meteorological service. Mm-hmm. I am a meteorologist, my background. Really, what we do is we provide weather information, forecasts for the country. So that essentially means that we are responsible for providing the weather bulletins and updates and alerts to give us future alerts to know what we do in times of weather.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Additionally,
sure,
one of our other focus is really to provide information and weather information observations for the airports. That's why our offices are located at both airports in Dominica.
All right. And Mr. Glenroy Toussaint, Local Government Commissioner, welcome to the program. Talk to our listeners about Glenroy.
Let me say good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here to your viewers and your listeners as well. Unlike Fitzroy and James, I'm wearing two hats.
Yeah.
All right, I'm primarily the local government commissioner, and by virtue of being the local government commissioner, I'm also the chair of the NIPO Shelter Subcommittee. I have been in this position for the last 5 years, local government commissioner, as well as being the chairman of the NIPO Shelter Subcommittee, a very important subcommittee within the whole aspect of disaster risk reduction and management in Dominica. And the primary role of the Emergency Shelter Subcommittee is to identify suitable emergency shelters to serve the general public in times of adverse events and shocks, that we should say. And importantly as well, tying with that too, is identifying suitable persons or shelter management personnel to administer those various emergency shelters on the island.
All right. Okay, so gentlemen, listeners, I'm sure you know why we're here and why these three gentlemen are here. We are 1 week into the hurricane season, and so I want to start with Mr. Itoma James and ask you, let's begin with the predictions for this hurricane season. What is the outlook?
Well, this year, the hurricane season, the forecast is saying that we are expecting a normal season, a near normal season. But for me, I like to focus really on not telling people or telling them not to focus on what the forecast says, because it doesn't mean that this is for hurricanes that will make landfall or tropical storms that will make landfall. It pretty much just gives us a prediction of what is expected to form in the Atlantic Ocean. So our focus should really be on preparedness and making it a part of our lifestyle. So this hurricane season forecast saying that it's going to be near normal just means that we do expect the hurricane season to start, and we should be expecting all of the different disasters to come, so we should just be prepared.
Right, it's interesting, as a Met officer, you've jumped immediately on preparedness. Is it to say that as citizens, when we hear near normal, above normal, below normal, that these are not the buzzwords we really should be listening to, but more so just be aware that the hurricane season has begun and we need to up our preparedness? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, to some extent, yes, but at a point of correction, I wouldn't even say that you should start getting prepared at the time of the hurricane season. That is something that should be going on year-round, as we can see that in our past, in November 6, just before the season ended, we had a trough system that caused immense devastation in the southeast and east. So preparedness should not just be something that we think of for the hurricane season, but even prior to that, and making it a part of our lifestyle.
All right. And Mr. James, we're going to get back to you and talk a little bit more about weather patterns and the work of the Met Office. But I really wanted to ask you that off the bat, because, you know, in the past 2 weeks or so, people have been very preoccupied with how hot it is. And I mean, social media is abuzz with the fact that it is really so hot. So I really wanted to ask you, as Met Officer, just the fact that people usually associate the heat during that period with how intense they expect the hurricane season to be. Is there really a connection between the kind of heat we are feeling now and the kind of hurricane season we should expect?
Well, yes, the sea surface temperatures, to be exact, is one of the main factors that would use to determine the intensity of hurricanes and how the hurricane season may unfold. But this season we also have a counteracting force, which is the development of the El Nino. So with those two major factors happening at the same time, which is really not something that they have a lot of research and records on to say that how it will predict, how it will unfold, this is one of the main reasons leading to there being a normal or near normal forecast, because you have two factors that kind of counteract each other. So the sea surface temperature is really, yes, it is one of the features that could help intensify the hurricane season, but then the development of the El Nino could also counteract that. So we just wait and see how it actually unfolds, because there's not much precedence that shows what happens in that scenario.
All right, and we'll talk a little bit more about that during the hour. So, Mr. Pascal, even before we talk about the work of the ODM, in his introduction, Mr. Tuse spoke about NEPO, and I want our listeners to know what these terms mean off the bat, so when we use them going forward, they understand. What is NEPO?
NEPO is the acronym for the National Emergency Planning Organization. And I like that you asked it off the bat, as you said. So disaster management in Dominica doesn't rely solely on the ODM, the Office of Disaster Management. The ODM is the secretariat to the NEPO. NEPO is a body of actors, stakeholders, first responders, and it's headed by the Honorable Prime Minister as the chairman, with the deputy chairman, the Minister for National Security and Legal Affairs. Like I said, the ODM is the secretariat. There are 9 subcommittees or task force, and we have Mr. Glenroy Tuse here tonight. He's the chairman of the Emergency Shelter Management Subcommittee. There are 8 others, and we have added the fire and the police, the fire for search and rescue, and the police for security. The police has dual role. The chief of police is also the chair of the emergency telecommunications subcommittee, and there are 7 others.
All right. So the secretariat you speak of, the ODM, how is your office preparing this year in particular, because we're talking in 2023, for the eventuality of severe weather during this hurricane season?
The strategy that we utilize has not changed. We follow the National Disaster Plan, and the strategy speaks to informing and educating the populace, as we are doing right now. We have in an education session, and we also equip and exercise first responders. So the strategy has not changed, and we have been doing all the informing and educating, the equipping and exercising. We have been doing these activities year-round, and we have ramped them up during the hurricane season.
All right. You speak about activities, but can you be a little bit more specific about the kind of outreach you've done within the community, the training that you speak of, some examples to prepare, to help groups, individuals, communities prepare better for the hurricane season?
I think as we speak, there's a team from the ODM at La Plaine doing a session with the community of La Plaine. And I think me and Itoma, we did a session with Delis last week. So we've been going around on Thursday nights into the various communities. We have one of our staff going visiting schools on a Wednesday. So every Wednesday he goes to the schools and speak with the young kids. And also we have a session on Kyrie FM on a Monday night. So we've been doing a lot in terms of informing and educating. In terms of equipping, we have been conducting training, and again, I don't want to say as we speak, but we just concluded a session in the Kalinago territory this week where we had training in shelter management together with the local government, and also emergency radio communication training for that community, the Kalinago territory.
All right. I know Mr. Tuse will speak to us in much detail about the work of the shelter committee, but can you comment even further, Mr. Pascal, on some of the various committees within the NEPO functional area heads? You mentioned fire, you mentioned police. How prepared do you think they are to respond in the event of a natural disaster?
I will mention the Public Utilities Subcommittee that is chaired by the PS of Public Works, that ministry. And they are prepared in that they have a list of all the heavy equipment on island, and in the event of any adverse event, they are ready to preposition these heavy equipment island-wide to restore access in the quickest possible time, post post-event. If I may speak to, I'll just take one of the bath, emergency telecoms. All the actors and the stakeholders in terms of the business places and the first responders, all their radio equipment are in order, and every Friday they carry out tests with this equipment to ensure that communication is maintained island-wide before, during, and after an event.
You know, it's interesting, Fitzroy, that you speak about emergency communications, because we really took a hard hit in that area with Hurricane Maria. Can you comment on the kind of interventions the government has made in that particular area to ensure that we were better prepared if we were hit by another major storm?
Well, we have been working with the all the providers in terms of Flow, Digicel, but at a national level, at the public service level, we have ensured that there's redundancy in communication. We've done a lot with the police in terms of security and radio communication. We have, there are satellite phones available should the normal cell phone or the cell sites fail, and we just need to have the satellite phones. They work independently. They just need to have a clear site to the satellite, and you'll get service from that. So I know the national system has secured satellite phones in the event that the cell sites go down. In terms of radio equipment, two-way radio or ham radio, we work closely with the WARA. That's one of the radio clubs on island, and also the Darcy. I think Mr. Clement PLW is the head of this one. So we have them on board also. We have strengthened the communication in terms of repeaters island-wide. We've ensured that these repeaters can withstand the systems, and I don't know if you say as we speak, but we're just doing some intervention at Ahoja, that's in the Salisbury Heights, to ensure that these equipment are secured in these locations.
All right, that sounds good. Mr. Tuse, on to shelters for now. We know that the government of Dominica has invested pretty heavily with the assistance of the European Union, for example, in the construction of regional hurricane shelters. We saw the successful completion of one at Castle Bruce, Jimit, and the previous one at Layu. But how advanced are we with the preparation of shelters this year, ahead of this hurricane season?
Okay, let me just let me just say from the onset that the overall shelter stock has significantly improved, and that is as a result of the government comprehensive housing development program, where people have built back better. Of course, the apartment complexes throughout the island following Maria has also helped in terms of resilient infrastructure, and persons are occupying that in a safe environment, and that is critical. And as you indicated, very importantly, the two regional shelters that were commissioned last year, sometime in May, in Jimit and Castle Bruce, we are pretty clear that those two facilities, those two infrastructure, has certainly helped in enhancing our shelter capacity in Dominica. Of course, just for the listeners, we have in Jimit a shelter capacity of over 500 people, and another in Castle Bruce of a capacity of 300 people. So clearly within those two facilities you can house 800 people. I need to say, as we are on the regional shelters, that and importantly, what those two facilities have done is to ease the burden on the use of schools. Primarily, a lot of our shelters are schools, public, to an extent, public schools, primary and secondary schools. And so we know what happened post-Maria in terms of the occupancy of those schools and the length at which those schools were occupied by persons at the various shelters. And so those two facilities are really going to ease the burden. It's going to help us in terms of the catchment. It has certainly helped in that regard, because you're talking of, for example, Jimit. We have a large catchment area, and we have vulnerable communities within that catchment. So you're talking of a catchment for Jimit of between Canefield to Taro. And one can even conclude that you can extend to even Fonkole, So yes. So that has helped. But importantly, every year what we do an assessment. Because it's important to assess the number of persons who acquired state facilities during the Atlantic hurricane season. So we annually we do an assessment of the number of persons we require to be sheltered. So we do a basically shelter needs assessment, so to speak. For this year, based on our assessment, we have 3,570 people who will require to be sheltered in state structure, so to speak, shelters provided by the state. We've seen a decline compared to 2022 when we had 3,760 people. And that decline is primarily that persons have built back better. The apartment buildings are available and are occupied, and people are in a safer environment. So that has significantly caused that decline in the number of persons island-wide who require state to be provided to them. So that is very important. We also have seen, and one must not take a decline in shelter capacity to mean that we don't have capacity. Island-wide, if you figure that, island-wide, we have a capacity of 7,960 island-wide shelter capacity. It means, therefore, we can shelter 7,960 people island-wide, but mindful as well that the number of persons that require state sheltering is 3,500. So we're above, island-wide, we're above capacity in terms of persons that required to be sheltered. So we have identified and provided to the general public 101 emergency shelters for the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season. And that has declined from 2022, where we had 111. Now, the reason for that is we have had, during our assessment, to look at the overall vulnerability of some communities. Of course, James mentioned the trough system of November 6 that impacted the east and the southeast. And so you have vulnerable communities like Petit Soufriere and Good Hope and the Saint-Sauveur area, where we had last year shelters demarcated for them. We have had to make that change because of the vulnerability of those communities. And so we are moving those individuals from those communities to the Castle Rose Emergency Shelter. So we have had to struck out the shelters that we had previously in 2022 for those communities. We also had to struck out the Campbell area where we used the school. We had demarcated the school in 2022 to be used. And of course, Campbell is also a vulnerable area. So we are going to move the people from Campbell to the regional shelter in Jimmet. So we are making tremendous strides. We are continuing to improve as far as it relates to shelter and our shelter stock in Dominica. And the good thing about it, the less shelters you have, it means therefore something good is happening. Yeah. You don't have to have this hustle and this bustle to provide so many shelters to your population, because I've always said we have to understand there are tiers of responsibility as far as disaster risk reduction is concerned. There is the individual responsibility, the individual responsible for your safety. There is the family responsibility, the family is responsible for the safety of the family. There is the community responsibility. That's the third one. And of course, the state responsibility. So when we have to collectively look at it, the safety of each and every one of us first begins with us. The state will come in when it has to come in. And so we have made that provision. And I need to also inform the viewing and listening public as well that there are a number of areas where we have assigned shelters to that are not within the community. So we're talking of communities like Collyhook, Meru, Coolibis Taru. You're talking about Sultan Layu Park. We're talking of Massac, Canefield. Those communities, they are assigned shelters. So we assigned, for example, the Canefield, Campbell, Massac area to the regional shelter in Jimmet. The Meru people to the John Keller Bloran Primary School in St. Joseph. The Colio people to the regional shelter in Layu. With the Coolibis Tree, of course, at the Monrachet Resource Center, the community center. And we're talking of Layu Park Sultan. We are taking them to the Jimmet regional shelter. So we have made that arrangements. So we've covered the entire island. So it's important that we inform the listening and the viewing public that even if when the list is published and you do not see a shelter for Miro, don't allow anxiety to build in, because provisions have been made for those individuals in those communities to be taken. Shelters are already assigned to them, and so that is very, very critical as well. One of the things that we've done as well, we recognize clearly that we have a migrant population, and they too have to access those shelters that we have. And we have what we call shelter rules and regulations. Like anything else, since Maria, we've been very strict with those shelter rules, because we recognize you learn lessons. There are lessons that were learned during Maria, and we do not want to repeat what transpired. So we have been very strict in terms of our rules and our regulation. And of course, we have a migrant population. So what we've done, we have translated the shelter rules, we have in English, we have it in Spanish, so that's for our friends from the Spanish-speaking countries. We have it in Haitian Patois, and we have it in People's Republic of China language, the Mandarin. Yeah, the Chinese Mandarin, we have it so. So that will be strategically placed once the shelters are activated, so that we accommodate everyone. So everyone is clear on what are the rules, the regulation, and how they govern themselves as far as it relates to the shelter. But certainly we are making strides. We continue to make tremendous strides. And our intention is to see, as we move gradually, there will be less and less shelters made available, because we have strengthened our resolve as individuals, as families, as communities, and as a country in ensuring the safety and security of our citizenry.
Okay, that's all very interesting, Mr. Tuse. Brilliant, actually. But before we move on, you mentioned earlier that you would have had to engage people in the community to serve as shelter managers. Where are you with that process? Are they trained? Do you do training yearly? Where are we with shelter managers?
Yes, indeed. We have to. We are very strong on that, because the thing is, one, I often listen to people, and some people say shelter management is complex. Things have changed. You know, the traditional way we used to do shelter management, we cannot do it. Just come in. It's no longer coming and just opening a shelter. There are lots of things that has to be done. And certainly the approach that we are taking is a team approach to shelter management. It's not just a shelter manager and assistant manager, but it's a team approach. And of course, we have identified those individuals. And as Fitzroy indicated, we have started a process of refresher courses, and we're doing a 2-day. The shelter management training is 2 days, not just 1 day. It's 2 days. We have started in the Kalinago territory. We'll continue. Next week, we are going to Cassibrus to do the Cassibrus, Good Hope, Sansovia, Pidit Sufia area. And following that, we'll move to the south, to the Grand Bay, Bacatel, Tetmon, Pichelin, Belleville Chopin. And we go on, because importantly, as we continue to solidify our shelter management portfolio, we have to build the capacity. And so we continue with that training, because we have some new people coming in. And even if we have people who have served before, they still need a refresher. We still have to go back and review stuff and see what are the best practices and what is critical in that regard, because we're talking about the life of people. You know, we're talking about the lives of people, and that is critical. So we're continuing that process. And while I'm there, I really want to say hats off to the volunteers, because the shelter management personnel, they are volunteers. And importantly, we want to clearly recognize them. And one of the things that we're doing is to ensure that they have picture identification. So we have started the process already, and a number of them have already had the picture identification, identifying as a shelter manager, as an assistant manager, and things of that nature. And we'll continue, and we have to be mindful as well to really encourage the general public to just give the support, because those are individuals who are giving the voluntary service for us, for all of us, helping the community, helping each and every one of us. And I think it's just fair that we too render the support to them, those shelter management personnel.
All right. We'll talk a little bit more about shelter coming up. But Mr. Pascal, as the hurricane season advances, we need to remain alert and prepared. And I think Erica and Maria taught us so many lessons in that regard. How important is it to develop a plan before the hurricane season, or at least very early in the hurricane season, and what should that hurricane plan look like?
Of course, there's a saying where you fail to plan, you plan. Sorry, where you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it is important to have that plan to reduce the anxiety whenever the adverse event comes around. At least when you plan, you know what you're about. Your family knows what they have to do. Everyone knows what they have to do. You can extend it to the community level. So you have the individual plan, the family plan, the community plan, and that makes the burden on the national system, reduce that burden on the national system. So the planning for us is very important, and it is all part of the preparedness activities that we go through, even not just before the season, but it's we want to make preparedness a lifestyle. So that plan should be there year-round, actually. Mm-hmm. Because outside of the season, you still have events occurring outside of the season. Mm-hmm. And not want to bash the hurricane season, but we have other hazards that we have to look at.
All right. But I know that your job at the ODM at NEPO, to some extent, is really about planning and when we are hit by major events, implementation. But you do spend a lot of time planning. But when we talk about the individual level that Mr. Tuse alluded to, the family level, the community level, what should we be doing at these different phases? What should the family be doing, for example, very specifically to prepare for a hurricane? And I'm sticking with hurricane tonight, if you don't mind. I mean, you could extend it, but I don't know. I'm just inclined to hurricane because, we're in the first week, it's June, etc. But
okay, so you should know your vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So as you said, we're sticking to hurricane. So you should know what the hazard entails, know your vulnerability, know what is wrong with you. So if you have the overhanging trees, you should ensure that these are cut. You clear your drains, you secure your roof, you ensure that your household is secure. You should have that at the individual level. You should have that community plan. The communications plan. The communications plan. Very important that persons know who they have to contact within the family, and it's important to have that communication plan. So post an event, after an event, you know how to make contact with your friends and family, your relatives. Mm-hmm. That plan should have the emergency kit. You made mention of it earlier on. It should have your important documents, your basic supplies, your personal supplies, stuff for babies, stuff for your pets, stuff for your elderlies, like I don't know if I mentioned medicine earlier on. And then you should also have that evacuation plan leading to the shelter. If you know you're in a vulnerable area and your household will be compromised, you ensure that you know the safest and quickest route to your emergency shelter, which Mr. Tuse spoke of earlier on, so that the burden on the emergency or first responders is lessened, and you go to that emergency shelter long way in advance before the arrival of the system.
Mm-hmm. As we talk about the emergency kit and stocking up on basic supplies, I was just talking to somebody, must have been earlier this week, and the person rightly pointed out that when we tell people during the hurricane season or 2 days before a storm hits, go to the stores, stock up on supplies, that not everybody has the financial ability to do that in the moment. Having worked in this area for quite a number of years, Fitzroy, do you have any advice to citizens as to how they can plan better in terms of the stocking up that we talk about?
Yeah, so Dion, I wanted to correct you. Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned earlier on that preparedness should be a lifestyle. Yeah. So we should not wait until ITOMA comes on June 1st at the start of the hurricane season to say that we're going to stock up on sardines and corned beef and so on. We should be doing that year-round. So in March, we should do it. In February, right after Carnival, you should be doing it. So just year-round. If we get paid monthly or weekly, but every time you get a paycheck, you put one thing aside, one tin of sardine, one corned beef, one bottle of water. At the end of the day, it will certainly add up, and it will certainly be useful when you're called to move to the shelter, or if you can shelter in place and have your stocks readily available.
Of course, that's really just the logical thing to do. Personally, I start about March, and every month end when you do your grocery shopping, you just add a little bit more, and you put it into a container or whatever it is you use for storage, and you continue that until August, September, and probably you can use it all up by Christmas and start again in the next year. But it really is a good method, so I'm happy you were able to answer that question in that way, Mr. Pascal. Thank you. Any advice for business owners? We don't talk about them much, but the business community, what do you tell them in terms of safeguarding their properties, safeguarding their businesses during this season?
There's something called the Business Continuity Plan. I think the DAIC, Dominican Association of Industry and Commerce, they have been ensuring that their members have this business continuity plan. And what this will do is assist you in restoring your business in the quickest possible time after an impact. So you don't your downtime is reduced, and you can provide your service and generate your income right after an event.
All right. Mr. James, we've had you on quiet for the past half hour. So some terms that we use in Met, we hear them a lot during the hurricane season. For example, a hurricane watch, a hurricane warning. Can you define some of these? What's a hurricane watch? What's a hurricane warning? What do they mean? And how we are expected to act during these periods?
Okay, well, the hurricane watch. A watch pretty much tells us that we are expecting or can expect hurricane or tropical storm force winds within our area, within the designated area, within 36 to 48 hours. So what that does, it gives you at least 48 hours to prepare and act, figure out what you need to do, if you need to move, because the hurricane shelters will be open at least 24 hours before. So that information is provided early enough so that you can react in time and not be panicking and in a rush. The warning gives you at least 24 hours. So they are pretty much just information to give you alert times on how you can, when you should react and what we expect. So if it's a hurricane warning, then we expect hurricane force winds, and if it's a tropical storm, we expect tropical force storm force winds.
And these storm force winds you speak about, we hear 45 miles per hour, 60, 75, 80. Can you talk about when we move through the different levels of a hurricane and the intensity? Can you talk to us about the intensity levels of these storms?
Well, the different intensity is, they depend on the wind speed. And so you keep listening and you hear you have a tropical storm. It will move from a tropical storm to a hurricane at different categories. You have category 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, the major hurricanes that can cause tremendous damage. With all of that said, I really try to shy away from going into all of the science of the hurricanes and try to get people to understand that there are different factors that can affect us that we have to take into consideration. So there may be wind, but one of the major elements that cause damage in Dominica is the rain. And the hurricane, the tropical storm, it doesn't really tell us, the category will not say how much rain damage or water damage can take place. So another important factor we need to take into consideration is the rainfall. So the expected amount of rainfall is something that is very critical to us here in Dominica. While major storms like Maria may be a one-off, David, we see probably 1 or 2 in our lifetimes. We have tropical storms and troughs that affect us yearly, all the time, and they come and they can provide a lot of rainfall. So what we have to also take into consideration is not just because they say that we have a tropical storm and we think it's not going to be as strong as what we experienced with Maria. We have to understand that the damage that can be caused by the rainfall is also significant. So if you live in vulnerable areas that you know that are prone to landslides, falling rocks. I know people tend to make fun of the fact that we always have landslides and falling rocks, but these can be very significant. It can cut you off from communications for days. So pay attention to those factors also, not just what category of storm it is. Because the storms, the names, all of these things are all fancy, but there are simple things that we need to take into consideration. The rainfall amounts can cause significant damage, and we should really pay attention to those.
Yeah, it's so interesting that a Met officer is talking about fancy language and technical language when really what we've heard from our population is that they really would like it broken down a little bit more into simpler language that they can better appreciate, which you've just done, which is that there's going to be heavy rain and it's likely to cause damage and that kind of thing. So can we expect to hear more of that direct language going forward, Itoma?
Well, Miss Diran, if we at the Met Office put the effort in, I think one of the things that we are looking to do is make ourselves more visible and a bit more understandable so that the everyday person can understand what we are trying to portray, because it makes no sense that we keep providing information to people that they don't understand and tomorrow they tell you that they were not informed. So we are in the process of actually developing or making ourselves more visible in social media by being a bit more new age. Making the younger people be able to understand what we are saying while not giving up on the older platforms like the radio. Even then, we try to change some of the wording or we reach out to people. So that is a part of the program, and we are in the middle of doing some of those things, and we just hope that the people appreciate them when we do it.
Yeah.
And don't shy away from asking. If you don't understand, say, so that we can make the different changes to try to accommodate everyone.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. We also hear complaints from the public about the timeliness of weather bulletins. Can you explain your process at the Met Office? How do you decide on when to issue a particular alert, for example? What is that process like?
Well, a lot of our decisions when it comes to providing or issuing alerts in terms of tropical storms and hurricanes really is guided by the information that we collect from the National Hurricane Center. And I would just like to say at this point, I think our process should be speeded up a bit because we no longer have to depend on the Barbados Meteorological Service to make communications with the National Hurricane Center on our behalf. We as a country now can directly communicate with the National Hurricane Center, and those decisions will now be made in a bilateral communication rather than having a middleman trying to help guide the process. So with the development of some new capacity in human resource, we have our own forecasters who have now garnered the experience in dealing with some of these systems. It should speed up some of the communications that we have.
I want our listeners to understand. So is it that you're telling me that going forward we won't be hearing anymore that the government of Barbados has issued a watch or a warning, but instead we'll be hearing that the government of Dominica has?
And that is exactly what I'm saying.
That's brilliant. If I were in news, that would make it to my news in the morning because it's new and it's interesting. So thank you for that revelation, Mr. James, and we certainly look forward to, as I said, the timeliness of the weather alerts improving, right?
Yes.
All right. You spoke about improving your social media outreach and that kind of thing, but how do members of the public, how do you advise members of the public to keep abreast of weather events, to keep themselves informed?
Well, currently, our main platform is really the radio. So we provide all our forecast information on the radio. We also have our website, which is weather.gov.dm. We are also trying to now go into making our social media platforms more active. So we will have our Facebook page, which is already active, the creation of Instagram and Twitter and different platforms where we can provide the information to reach people whenever they need it. And also, like we have been trying to do, simplify some of that information so that when persons see the information, they can know what it means and how to act when they see it.
Right. I wanted to ask you another question. because of the advent of social media and how it is so widely used, we see a lot of information about weather events via social media during the event. Some of it is reliable, I'll admit, and others not so much. As the Met Officer, the senior Met Officer, what is your advice to the general public in terms of how much credibility they should assign to the information they access via social media during any weather or disaster event?
Well, my main advice really is to double check everything you see. You look at it, you have a local media weather station that will provide you with information. Sometimes it might be the exact same information, sometimes it may be different. So what you need to do is, when you see the information on social media, take social media for what it is. Social media is a platform to keep people entertained, to keep you hooked. So if you see information on weather on the social media accounts, it doesn't mean that it is wrong, but most times it is geared at garnering viewers. The Met Service, the local Met Service, our job really is to inform and alert. We are not trying to sensationalize anything. We just want to give you the information so that you can know how to prepare and act in accordance. So you can always double check when you see those information, just to make sure that what you see actually is in accordance with what your local station is saying.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Mr. Tousse, we're still in the realm of preparedness, and I wanted to touch back on shelters and access to shelters. What is your advice for citizens about how and when they should be accessing these shelters? In other words, when is the right time to move to a shelter?
Okay, that's a very interesting conversation that we need to have with our listening and viewing public. The thing is, we always advise people, as soon as the information is given that shelters are activated, we're asking people within half an hour you should be at the shelters. So if, for example, by 5 p.m., the advice has been given for shelters to be activated, by 5:30 people should be already in their shelters. Even before that. The problem we have, and we really want to urge the viewing and listening public to be mindful of that. The problem we have in Dominica is people like to wait. So they come in at the 11th hour and create more chaos and confusion. So the ideal time is, we're saying half an hour even before that, but we're saying that as soon as the shelters are activated, people need to come to those shelters. Because one of the things that you'll do in coming early, you make life much easier for shelter management personnel. There is no chaos and confusion, because people coming at the last minute is always a lot of anxiety. And so we are telling people that as soon as it's activated, we are saying at least half an hour. It can be earlier, but at least half an hour, people should find themselves at the various emergency shelters. Because what we want is to ensure that we don't have all of these challenges in terms of people coming at the 11th hour and the rush and everything.
Mm-hmm. What should people bring to a shelter?
That's a very interesting question. I like that one. Before I respond, there is one person tells me, you know what I know you as? Don't come to the shelter with your hands swinging. That is what I know you as, Mr. Tousse. I said, well, that is very well what I'm saying. The thing is, we are saying, and as Fitzroy indicated, if you have your well-developed family plan, you would have had your emergency kit. And so we are telling people, when you're coming to the shelter, and I will repeat it again, do not come with your hands swinging. Because it's your individual responsibility, it's your family responsibility to ensure that you do what is necessary for your own disaster management efforts. And so we are saying, for basic, at least you must come to the shelter with water to last you for at least 3 days, with some basic supplies, some canned food, some biscuits and things of that nature. Your valuables, if you feel that it's not safe at your home, your valuables, your medication. That is important, because we know there are persons on medication and they require it. So come with your medication. And what we're telling people, even beforehand, what is being encouraged, and we know there can be some challenges, but if you can get at least 3 or 4 months in advance of medication, that would be good. I know it can be challenging, that not many people have the resources to do that. But if you can, that would be good. And simply come with, we're not telling people to come with their beds and all of those things, but blankets, a little blanket, some food, some supplies that will last you and your family. Because I want to make it clear to our viewing and listening public, there is no food in the shelter. So we do not want anybody to come to the shelter, and oftentimes we've had the experience, where the food government put there, in our local palace. So where the food government put there, there's no food. Government is not going to put any food because the objective of people going to the shelters is to ride the storm for the first 12 to 36 hours. After that, an assessment will be made, and if there is need for long-term sheltering, then so be it. The state will come in and the state will provide the resources and what have you. But the state is not going to put food in there at the shelter for you, waiting as you come in, where's the broth, where's the pilau, and things of that nature. So we are encouraging, we are telling people that, and I continue to say it, that do not come to the shelters with your hands swinging. We know for a fact that we have persons in our society, in our communities, who really are challenged in terms of even coming with a little bottle or so of water or something. We are aware of that, and efforts will be made to find ways and means to support those individuals. But for the wider population and persons who can, we are not expecting people to just walk in and expect the shelters to have everything waiting to be eaten and to enjoy and to be merry. That's not the purpose.
Yeah. All right. Earlier on, you referenced rules that the shelters operate according to set guidelines. How are citizens expected to behave in shelters, Mr. Toussaint?
Oh, that's the thing is, I always tell. That's another very good question, Dion. we always tell people that you understand the purpose for which we have come to a shelter, and I just said it a while ago, is to ride the storm, right? We should be each other's brother, each other's keeper. And in my opinion, we don't necessarily have to pray every time there's something approaching, but at least the atmosphere should be a peaceful, cordial one where we just seek the Almighty Father and ask for guidance and ask for protection and sing and pray and that kind of thing. We should pray all the time, by the way. But it's that kind of atmosphere we experience. But like anything else, you get those things. That is why the approach that we are taking is to have shelter teams, shelter people, the shelterists themselves assist in that regard. We expect people to be cordial. We have the rules. We tell you no dangerous weapons. We tell you no pets, your animals. Take care of that before you come to the shelter and do things. And we expect people, and we are appealing. We are appealing to our people to please help up each other. Understand we have senior citizens who don't like this noise. They like quietness. They like peace and tranquility. And so we have to understand those things as well. So that is the kind of behavior we expect from people, to understand what you like may not be the liking of another person. And so we have to understand that and live cordially, because all we're doing is riding the storm, ensuring that we all are safe and we all are secure. Importantly, safety is one, but security is another one. So we have to be safe and secure. Yeah. So that's the kind of behavior we expect people to be cordial, to assist each other, and to understand.
All right.
Understand that we all have different needs, and we have to ensure that we work collectively to ensure that all of our needs are met in that regard.
Fitzroy, he just mentioned something about looking out for each other, which reminded me of an important aspect of preparedness at the community level, which is looking out for the vulnerable among us, early during the hurricane season, in preparation, and certainly during a weather event. What is your advice in that regard?
There's the welfare subcommittee, which promotes that all the vulnerable persons in the community are identified. The Ministry of Health helps in that regard. There's a list which is circulated among the NEPO players or actors, the task force. The fire service is responsible for partly transporting personnel. So there is this list, and the list is available to the players, and we ensure that these vulnerable people or persons get priority treatment. We ensure that they're safe, that they're taken to shelters. If they cannot seek shelter in place, that they go to the dedicated emergency shelters, and that they get priority treatment when they are there. And like Tusa said, we're asking the populace to assist the emergency services in ensuring that these vulnerable persons among us are safe and secure.
Gentlemen, believe it or not, it's already 3 minutes before 9 o'clock. It has been a very interesting discussion. You certainly know your stuff. My commendations on that to all three of you. I hope that you get the opportunity throughout the hurricane season to make similar appearances on the radio stations, various talk shows, including the morning talk shows. I think you have a lot to share that our population would find useful. But we're winding down our program here on Focus on Government and Development, and I wanted to give each of you the opportunity to just look ahead at the work you plan to do on behalf of the Dominican population to continue to prepare for the eventuality of severe weather at the Met Office in terms of shelter management, and certainly at the ODM. Mr. James, and this is by way of your final comments. Mr. James.
Okay, so we just want to, at the Met Office, ask the Dominican public to, just trust us and trust the work that we do and understand that we have the best interests of the country at heart. We are developing, like I said, new platforms to try to get the information out to you in a more timely manner, and we just hope that going forward we can do a better job at informing the public and just garnering some appreciation from the Dominican populace.
All right, and Mr. James, this is the first time I've heard you in some detail. I know you do give the weather reports previously, but this is the first time I've heard you speak about weather, and I certainly look forward to hearing much more from you, and I look forward to the changes you plan to spearhead at the Met Office. So congratulations, and we look forward to the work you will do in terms of weather here in Dominica. Mr. Tusa, your final comments?
My final comment will continue to be the fact that we want people to take responsibility. We want individuals to take responsibility for the safety. And we also want to, again, encourage and call upon the general public. Do not come at the last minute to the shelters. Once the shelters are activated, please get in there because it makes life more comfortable for us. And we will sought in many respects to make it a welcoming shelter experience for the persons, in the event anything occurs during the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season.
Yeah, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Mr. Tusi, I have to tell you, I could listen to you all night. You really do know this shelter business very intimately. And I commend you for the work you've done in that capacity over the past 5 years, you said? Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah. And Mr. Pascal, your final comments.
We at the ODM and at NEPO, we continue to enhance the services. We're in the process of decentralizing services, and probably we'll speak on that sometime in the future. As I said, increase public awareness. We have been doing a lot with regards to public awareness in terms of informing and educating the populace. And we really want to continue to engage the persons, particularly those on the ground. We have district development committees which play a significant role in ensuring that the message is passed to the grassroots man. So that's at the NEPO level, at the national system level. But at the public level, we want to encourage the populace to adopt preparedness as a lifestyle. And as Mr. Tusa said, do not wait on the national system, but you too have an individual responsibility to ensure the security and safety of your life and property.
Thank you so much, Fitzroy. I know we'll talk again during the season, and thank you for your steady leadership at the ODM. Gentlemen in general, I want to thank you for coming on, and don't be a stranger, because I think we really need to keep hearing this stuff throughout the hurricane season, and as Fitzroy likes to emphasize, throughout the entire year. We need to keep our awareness on high. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been tuned in to Focus on Government and Development. This evening we spoke with Mr. Itoma James. He's the acting senior Met officer. Also, Mr. Glenroy Toussaint is the chairman of the Shelter Committee of NEPO. And Mr. Fitzroy Pascal, the National Disaster Coordinator, head of ODM, the Office of Disaster Management. Sharing with us their expertise on how best to prepare ahead of the hurricane season. Hope you took in their best advice to stay alert, stay prepared, do your best to secure your homes and property, plan for your family. An emergency family communications plan is always very important. Just in general, stay prepared. You're invited to join us again on this program, Focus on Government and Development, for another topic of national interest. My name is Dion Dura Smith. I do wish you a good Thursday evening.